Hi, my name is Jim Reinheimer. I'm an educational consultant at Blast Intermediate Unit 17. Thank you for joining me today. Today's topic is, what can I do for inclusion? And at this time, I'm going to share my screen with you. And here we go. Again, thank you for joining me. Like I said, if there's any contact that you wanted to, if you have any questions at the end of this webinar, if you wanted to reach out to me, I'm always happy to take questions, always happy to collaborate and to interact and get to know all of you. So my email address is there, my office phone number is there, and you can also find me on Twitter as well. So today's essential question is, in what ways can we as educators value the importance of inclusion for all students and implement effective strategies for unity and for success? So just a little quote that I always find, I just feel is so true. Fairness is not giving everyone the same thing. Fairness is giving each person what they need to succeed. So for every single one of us, what do we need so that we can be our best and how we can succeed? So first question is, what is an inclusive classroom? So we think about inclusion, we think about including all students together. We think about what do we see in those inclusive classrooms. So like what that is based off of an inclusive classroom is where students with or without learning differences can learn together. Okay, so, and we think about learning differences, we think about each and every one of us, we learn differently, we participate differently. We're all different. And that is not a bad thing. I think that's a wonderful thing. That's what makes us unique. And I think that is something that instead of it, otherwise I think it would become boring. So like I said, we welcome and support diverse academic, social, emotional, and communication needs of all students. So we think about that too, diverse. We support and we welcome. So that is part of inclusion and an inclusive classroom. I will be going over more examples with you during this webinar. So when it's done well, everyone in the room benefits. It strengthens the abilities of all kids to work together. So working together, understanding and valuing different points of view, thinking critically and be successful learners. So when you walk into an inclusive classroom, you're just seeing learning going on. You're seeing students working together, working with anyone who may have different communication needs. It just becomes more fluid, okay? Instead of becoming isolated, instead we are becoming more together. So, and a lot of wonderful resources I like to share, and this came from readingrockets.org. A lot of wonderful, great information that you can find at your leisure on inclusion, inclusive classrooms. So this came from understood.org, and inclusive classrooms are filled with diverse learners. So think about that statement, diverse learners. What does that mean exactly? So you think about not every single student learns the same way. Not every single student knows the same concept, all right? So that lets kids talk about how everyone learns in their own way. Each and every one of us, we learn differently. They may find that they have more in common with other kids than they thought. So finding as far as what ways are we alike with this person or this other person. All right, this can go a long way in reducing stigma for kids with learning and attention issues. Okay, it can also help kids build and maintain friendships. So we think about students who may have some learning difficulties. I think in each and every one of us, like we're stronger in some areas versus other areas. And also modeling is so important because it also helps us to build and maintain those friendships. We start finding what do we have in common with another student. Also helps with the social interaction piece. So Reading Rockets also, some great information here. We think about what is the yeses and nos of inclusion. So we think about, and you hear that term inclusion, and it's not something brand new we're starting. It's something that's been around for a long time, but it's just something we do naturally every day. And so we think about what are the yeses and nos of inclusion. So let me first give you some examples of what inclusion is not. Inclusion is not where the student spends the majority of the day in a special education classroom and goes to a general education classroom for 1 or 2 periods. Okay. Inclusion is not where the student's desk is away from all the other desks in the classroom. All right. Inclusion is not where they're going to come into a classroom, sit at a computer with headphones on, and not have the opportunity to interact. Inclusion is not where the student works on his or her own curriculum. So they're not going to be bringing their own work to do, where it's something separate from what the other students in the classroom are doing. Inclusion is not where the student is giving alternate choices in different activities and options with other special education students. So like not one group is working on something while the rest of the class is working on this. Student is looked upon as helpless, needy, and dependent. That is not inclusion as well. We also look at that it's not where the paraprofessional does not provide many opportunities for the student to complete work independently and others over the student. All right, so we want to do is we want to increase more success, more independence, maybe do those check-ins, and maybe make sure that they understand what they're going to be doing, check in, allow them to be able to interact as far as when they do need help, okay? Students' paraprofessional determines access to the curriculum and classroom activities. That is not inclusion as well. So it's not also where the student is pulled from classroom lessons and activities for other support without considering what the student will miss. It's not where we're going to take the student out and say, you know what, it's 30 minutes. They're going to miss in this. They're going to miss like these couple of concepts. That's okay. You know what I mean? So no. We can do it at other times when we want the students to not to be able to miss. We want them to be part of, okay? The student refers to other supports and paraprofessionals to identify student development. That's where the teacher relies on others to work with that student, for others to create the assessments as well as how else we're going to develop our curriculum. That is not inclusion. Also, the student does not know the peers and does not have many common classroom experiences. All right, so the student comes in the classroom and you put them in a certain place and they get up and leave, not being able to interact with other students, that is not inclusion, okay? So the more, I think it's more hands-on. So when the student is in there, you want to include so many different opportunities, and you start to see that it becomes more natural. Inclusion, some examples of, yes, this is inclusion. Students spends the majority of the day in a general education classroom. And I also want to say that it depends on we think about what is in the IEP. We think about as far as what's in their specially designed instruction, your SDIs. We also look at the percentage of time that they are out in the curriculum. Some do need more direct instruction. We also have to take into consideration of the diagnosis of the student as well. But we want to be able to include as much success as we can for that student and what they're able to successfully handle, and then continue to increase that. Inclusion is, we want to make sure that the student's desk is included with the other group of desks in the classroom. Have them pair with someone, especially students who want to help, students who just love to work with everyone. The earlier we can start this, the better. I've seen so many classrooms where the students, as a former special education teacher myself, bringing my students into, let's say, a kindergarten, first grade classroom, and they are included right in the same groups as the other students. They are working with them, and that student's having the opportunity to get to know those students. And that's where I just continue to see more success. Student has access to and is included in classroom lessons and activities that are adapted or modified to meet his or her special needs. Student attends class outside activities with the class, including assemblies, field trips, enrichment classes, and recess. We want to be able to provide what we can to continue that success for that student. Student is independent, valued, and respected. We want to continue to increase the independence, work on how for them to be successful, make them feel valued and respected. And we do that for all right? We do not single anyone out. So it's also students paraprofessional, excuse me, that facilitates access to the curriculum and classroom activities. So they are part of the natural process in the classroom. So it's not just working with this one student or this one group of students. They are working with all. So all staff are working with each other. Paraprofessional encourages child to complete work as independently as possible while providing support when that I think when we start to do less for our students, sometimes we think, oh boy, but no, that's a great thing. We want to have our students become as independent as possible. And at the same time, for them to know that it's okay to struggle and it's okay to have questions. It's okay and it's wonderful to ask those questions, because so many times we see students are not really wanting to ask those questions, maybe sometimes due to fear or due to maybe someone else is busy, but no, it's great to ask those questions for support. That helps create that independence. Student receives specialist support such as therapy, speech, language, with minimal disruption to class routine and programs. Okay, and all of that too, a lot of times these specialists, they may come into the classroom as well to work with all students and focus on that student to help continue that success. Teachers can identify students' strengths and areas for improvement. One of the first things that I learned as a teacher and I started to do was when I was, let's say, getting a new student, or if I was going to be working with a student, I started to ask, the first question I would ask, what are some of their interests? What do they like? Instead of, okay, what are their behaviors? Okay, where are they struggling? No, we want to build on what are they interested in? What are they successful at? Bring in those areas that we need to work on so that we could incorporate the success and the positives to help build that success. Students can name classmates and have many common classroom experiences. Building with having, let's say, at least one friend or more friends, that is so important. So some of the advantages. So what can we do? All right, so what's some of the advantages of inclusion? All right, first we want to become role models, okay? And not become, sometimes I think we already are. I think many times we already are. Not realizing it. So many times you think, okay, I wish I can do more. I wish I can do more. Sometimes just think, sometimes we always say that little quote, less is more. So, you know what? Think about what is acceptable social behaviors, model them. Model how we normally interact with others. Okay, that smile on your face, that welcome, good morning, it's great to see you today. Ask them, how was your night? What did you have for breakfast? Just somehow engage with them right from the start. Make them feel included. It's so very important. And by doing that, teach our students every day that this is something that we become, that we do naturally for each other. All right, so they become to learn what is acceptable. We also want to continue to work on social and emotional development. All right, so school isn't just about academic needs, all right? And especially we think about the year 2020, since we had COVID, so much of this piece became missing because we went to remote learning. So as we are back into classrooms, this social and emotional development is so very, very important right now. It's important every day. Academics is important, social and emotional development is important, okay? So we want them to be able to feel comfortable with others, okay? And have that positive experience. We want to increase tolerance, okay? So we want everyone to be together. And like I said, if there is a specific behavior or attention issue or an impulsivity, for example, you know what? They're not going to learn unless they can see it from others, and we can teach and model what is appropriate. So instead of telling them what not to do, tell them what they can do. All right. Tell them what they should do. Model it for them. All right. And especially when they're seeing it with their same age peers, okay, or around the same age peers as well. So the tolerance that we're all unique and wonderful. So in this slide here, how can we create that inclusive environment? So we think about, in order for it to work well, we need to continue to build those relationships. All right. That's inclusion. It's so important. That is inclusion. All right. So, and for many of you, if you work with many students in a day, it's hard to have a close relationship for a lot of time during the day. But that's why it's so important. Take that time in the very beginning and learn about their interests, learn about what they like. Use that genuine praise, that genuine feedback with your students, because that may only take 10 seconds, but you know what? That might be 10 seconds that they will remember for the rest of the day, the week, or the rest of their lives. Just think about that statement for a moment. That's so very important. Build that relationship. Celebrate diversity. I cannot begin to tell you how important this is. Celebrate it. So each and every one of us, we come from different backgrounds. We have different ethnic backgrounds. We think about each and every one of us from our family descent. We think about we think about the materials that we use in class. All right. Pay attention to those materials that you use. Okay. Think about as far as students who may have special needs. How can we celebrate the diversity in our classroom and teach our students to do the same? Incorporate it, not on a special day, but incorporate it throughout the day, every day. Just take those examples. How can we continue to educate ourselves? All right. For inclusion to work well, we need to continue to do that. Educating ourselves, I always say, I'm going to educate myself basically right from birth, okay, for the rest of my life. Every day there's always something new to learn, okay? So if we are working with a student who might have some disabilities, some learning needs, some behavior needs, we want to educate ourselves about what we can do to help and support them, all right? And then also continue to model that, so we're also educating our students. And many times I've learned from the students themselves. So many times I've learned from other students. And also that helps lead to more of building that connection, having compassion, and having that wonderful relationship, that positive relationship. We think about encourage interaction. So continue to educate, continue to encourage that interaction. So those opportunities when they can build those friendships, have that sense of community, all right? That interaction can be part of the learning process in that classroom and outside the classroom. Strengths-based approach, all right? So we think about our students, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. So as far as we always want to help the students to develop their strengths, and those areas that are weaknesses, you know what, we can tie in those strengths as I said before. We can help work on those areas so that we can build more success, all right? So focus on progress. So even if, let's say, we did not meet that goal, think about how far we've gone toward that goal, okay? So think about maybe going up 10 flight of steps. You know what? Maybe I didn't make it up all 10 flights of steps today, but I made it up 3 steps. Celebrate those 3 steps, all right? So let's say I wanted my students to sit in their seat for 10 minutes and today they only sat for 6 minutes. You know what? They sat in my seat for 6 minutes. That was wonderful. Instead of, oh my gosh, they could not sit for 10 minutes. All right, so we want to keep it positive. So all of these examples are creating that inclusive environment. So that's what we can do. Some Other teaching strategies, differentiate your instruction. We always hear about differentiation. Think about all of their abilities, all right, and how we can incorporate it together. Make your objectives clear. So as far as those objection, objectives, excuse me, that's a little typo I will fix. So the objectives, we want them to be in age-appropriate language. We also want them to be specific, and we want them to be measurable. And what we can do, maybe we can say it in the beginning and how we met it toward the end, all right? Or ask them to give an example. We can always adapt, all right? Like throughout the lesson, you know what? There's gonna be times where we plan for something, it's not always gonna go that way. Adapt it, it's okay. Some of my best lessons I've learned was when I had to adapt, all right? So provide that extra support when you need to. Explicit teaching and modeling. So we think about the I do, we do, you do, all right? We think about that. Give them the support. At times, maybe we want to change up the I do, we do, you do. Maybe you want them to try the you do first and then I do and then we do together. Or maybe we do it and then I'll do it and then you do it, however you want to do it. But we want to model it, all right, for our students. So main thing is help them to build that success. Teach to different learning styles. All right, we think about the multiple intelligences. We think about universal design for learning. All right, so that we want to be able to focus on all of the students, okay? Focus on what we can do to help them all learn. And always continuing to have that positive attitude. That positive attitude, you know what, that lesson just, maybe you may feel like nothing is going right in that lesson, but overall it may be. Or if it's not, you know what, have that positive attitude. You know what, it happens. And you know what, that's okay. Like I said, we are modeling. Children learn. They learn from our positive attitudes. They learn from our modeling. All right, so for example, we all make mistakes and that's okay. We acknowledge when we do, we learn from it and we move on. For example, I'm just moving on right now from this make objections instead of make objectives clear. So what else can I do at this point? If you are working with a student in your classroom who has an IEP or an FO4, sorry, 504 plan, get to know that plan. Read on that plan, ask those questions, who the caseworker will be for that. So usually it's a school counselor who will be doing the 504s usually, special education teacher for the student's IEP. Ask those questions, okay? Because that student is in your classroom, all right? And you wanna see them have that success. So whatever we can do to build success and make those accommodations or modifications if needed, so. Implement a universal design for learning. We do that so much more now as well. So we want them to be able to be successful. How are we going to engage our students? All right. What do they already know? How can they still continue to learn? All right. Support important life skills. All right, so we think about life skills, we think about the very basics, we think about life skills classrooms, so much more than that. We think about as far as what are some of the life skills that maybe we were taught 20, 30 years ago, maybe they're not teaching now, but it's still very important for our students. So we think about as far as some students, do they know how to tell time from an analog clock versus a digital clock? Do they know how to write a letter? Do they know how to be able to print versus write their name? Do they know how to write versus type? We think about, do they know how to take notes? Do they know how to organize their desk? Do they know how to put their homework away, write down their assignments? All right, we think about in our job role, all right? We think about so many things we need to do in order for ourselves to become successful. We also need to teach these strategies for our students. All right, those are what I mean by the important life skills. Teach all of those. You know what? If some of our students know how to do that, great. How can we maybe have those students help those who are still learning? because the ones who are teaching those students, maybe they do not know, cannot do maybe another task very well for something else that we're going to do. So, and develop that strong behavior management plan. So when I'm talking about this, for example, we think about as far as work on those behaviors, model those behaviors. When there's a behavior going on, how can we just implement that positive behavior so that we're not taking so much of our time period, all right? How can we not take that time period to focus on behaviors? We need to focus on the learning, incorporate positive strategies, all right? So learn how we can support our students. The website that I am referencing here has more information that you can take a look at and how we can continue to support inclusion. Wonderful quote I found here by Robert. We could learn a lot from crayons. Some are sharp, some are pretty, some are dull, while others bright. Some have weird names, but they all learned to live together in the same box. All right, and we learn from each other. All right, it's something that we do. I just thought that was very important. The final part of my webinar I wanted to go over just to review and just to share with you was how many of you, when we think about inclusion, some of us already think about Shelley Moore. I'm not sure if you have ever heard of Shelley Moore or not. So I do reference her book at the end of the webinar today, and I have this book here. I had the opportunity to meet Shelley Moore in March of 2018 at the Pennsylvania Department of Education conference. And I was able to have the opportunity to meet with her probably for at least 10 minutes. And I was very inspired by her speaking that day, meeting her afterwards. And just as far as her own teaching, the days when she was a teacher and what she has done, and just thinking about our learners and how we can learn and support each other. So when we take a look here, so like what is inclusion? So we take a look here, if we have A, B, C, or D, which of these is inclusion? If you are thinking letter C, you are correct. So exclusion is what you would see in the first circle, or the different colors are outside of the circle. Segregation is where they are in a separate circle right outside of the bigger circle. Inclusion is where they are still all together. They are all together, all learning with each other, all benefiting from each other, all doing a wonderful job. And then finally, what we want to do is we want to be able to move on to teach to diversity. So by leading to teach to diversity, we recognize, acknowledge, and support all of our students each and every day, and acknowledge those supports and benefits. So there is no other, inclusion is. So we think about not forcing separation. It's more than physical integration, all right? So we teach to diversity, not just valuing the green. We celebrate all, okay? And we find places where we can move along the inclusion continuum. It's all of us. And it's just something that we do every day. And how we can continue, if there's some ways where we can continue to grow, how can we continue to grow? And we work on it. So, and build more success for all. So, and when I met with Shelley that day, she kept talking about the analogy of the outside pin. We think about the bullet. And she will also reference it in the videos that I will share with you as you can take a look at it later time. And a lot of times is we try to bowl toward, we end up bowling, we always try to bowl down the middle. And somehow we always miss those outside pins. So then we always try to do is we try to aim so that we can meet and knock down more of those pins. By doing that, we're being able to, how can we meet the needs for all all right? And sometimes we think outside the box. Sometimes I think I'm that outside pin because I'm always trying to think, how can I support everyone? And for some teachers, they say this is impossible. We cannot support everyone, but we can in some way or another. It can be done. So don't be afraid to be an outside pin. And in fact, that was what she autographed in my book. I'm happy to share with you. And I was so very inspired by that day and by reading her book, and as well as taking some of these strategies and ideas, and that we need to make our students feel welcome, because that's why we are in this profession. And we celebrate each day and celebrate each other, all right? We can also, this is her final quote here, we are diverse, all of us. We all have strengths, we all have stretches, and we all have to get better at something. The differences in teaching to diversity, however, is that we don't start with our deficits, but we start with our strengths. So if you notice, I was saying that earlier, this is where I got it from. So from Shelley Moore. We think about the range and the range of all of our learners, all right? So get to know all of our learners, okay? And for you, think about these questions. What do each of your students bring? What are their stories? What is their background? All right, what is their history? All right, take all that history, incorporate it so that the story and chapters can continue. All right. We want to be able to teach our students to make the adjustments they need to be successful, all right, to continue to grow. So if I repeat any of these quotes over and over again, these are quotes that just always kind of stick in my mind, and I always want to share with all of you. So Shelley Moore has also said, how do you do inclusion? You don't do it, you live it. So you may have seen this quote before. I love this quote. We live it each and every day, both in the classroom, out of the classroom, in our professional roles, in our workplaces, in the community. We are inclusion. Here are some additional resources you can take a look at. The PDE website has more on equity and inclusion for all. The Teacher's Desk reference, the Patent website, has inclusive practices toolkit for educators. All you need to do is you will go on here and just click on the link. It will immediately it will come up for you. Cheryl Jorgensen wrote an incredible book called The Inclusion Facilitator's Guide. If you do not have read that book, you come across it. It's a great book to read. And blog some more. Shelley Moore also has, if you just click on here, she has her own blog website, some including some other handouts, videos, resources, articles, and one without the other book as well. And here are 4 examples of videos that you can take a look at. If you have not heard of Shelley Moore, you may have already seen these videos. These are ones that I like to take a look at sometimes and always just reference to others. So, final thoughts. Today's topic was, what can I do for inclusion? Think about this. What are you already doing? All right. Think of the positives. What are you already doing? What can we do to continue growing? So let's continue to take this journey, this inclusion journey together. Thank you so much for watching today's webinar. If you have any questions, again, at the beginning of today's webinar, you have my information. Please share with your friends, and just thank you so much for attending today.